All right. Thank you so much. Welcome and thank you for joining us for the opening session of the 2023 CCSE Research Conference. I'm delighted to introduce our special guest, Brian Lamb, founder of C-SPAN. Brian is a journalist and author celebrated for his pioneering work in the media landscape. Before launching C-SPAN in 1979, Brian actually served in the U.S. Navy and held a range of communication roles, including as a telecommunication policy staffer at the White House and Washington bureau chief for Cablevision magazine. He is well known for his interview skills and his signature style of asking concise, direct questions. He has conducted hundreds of interviews with internationally known figures, including U.S. presidents, members of Congress, historians, journalists, and authors. Throughout his career, Brian has been recognized for his commitment to a transparent political system and the free flow of ideas, receiving numerous accolades and honors, including the National Press Club's Fourth Estate Award and the Presidential Medal of Freedom, the highest civilian award in the United States. He has received an honorary doctorate from his alma mater, Purdue University, and his namesake for the university's communication school, the Brian Lamb School of Communication. Brian's contributions to journalism, government transparency, and media have left an enduring legacy, making him a distinguished figure in American political communication and communication history writ large. So please join me in welcoming Brian Lamb.
Good afternoon, everybody. Let's start right off with a question from me to Robert Browning. Do you remember, Robert, the moment you decided that something like your archive should be created, and what was motivating you?
Well, I met you around 1986 when you were on campus and you wanted to talk to some professors, and I was there. And it was really during that time, we all said, well, we couldn't really use C-SPAN in teaching and research, which was one of your ideas, because you had just founded C-SPAN in the classroom and you wanted professors to start using it. We said, we don't have televisions in our offices. VCRs were just a brand new thing. And there had to be an archive. And it was afterwards that I went to talk to Dave Caputo, who's our dean and now, who is the dean. He wasn't the dean then, he was the head of political science. And I told him about this kind of crazy idea. I thought it would be difficult, both difficult because of the scale of it. You know, we all knew about Vanderbilt University having the evening news, but they only did 90 minutes a day, or an hour and a half, actually. And to do 24 hours times two, there are two networks, was a big deal. But David Caputo and David Berg, head of communication, both thought it was a good idea, and they encouraged me to research it. And everybody at Purdue thought it was a good idea. There's nobody who put up an obstacle, and that's really how it happened.
Mary Fran Matson, why do you support the idea of having a cable C-SPAN center for education and engagement?
Well, there were actually a couple things that happened that led to that support. One of them was a challenge by the former president of Purdue, Mitch Daniels, when we kind of started our leadership positions here at Purdue at the same time. And when I was talking to him early on, he actually challenged me by saying, why would I want to come and study communication in the Brian Lamb School of Communication at Purdue rather than going to any other school in the country, Mary Fran? And I said, because we are the Brian Lamb School of Communication and we have a close connection with C-SPAN, C-SPAN archives. And he said, well, so what? And I said, well, that's important. And he said, well, how do we know that? And so I kind of took that on as a challenge. And I knew in part, that there was this desire to increase the opportunities to utilize the archives in higher education, in research, in teaching, in engagement, which are the pillars for Purdue's mission. And so thinking about what are some of the ways that we could do that, started collaborating with the then head of political science, Rosie Clausen, the dean, about how could we go about this. And that led to the proposal for the Center for C-SPAN Scholarship and Engagement, Robert was obviously very involved in that from minute one, and we got a lot of support from around the university, both from leadership, but also from faculty members who thought it would be important. Those of us here in the Lamb School, this would be a great way for us to connect to our namesake and what he has accomplished, and again, bring that into higher education. So that's how it happened, and I continue to think it's important. This conference and the many years that it's been going on is one of the reasons that I think it's important, is to share research, to share how we do it and how it's published and all of that. And so again, we'll continue to support it as long as I am not only head, but a professor here at Purdue and beyond.
On the screen is a fellow named Peter Kiley, right in the middle of my screen. And the reason I mentioned Peter is he's a Hoosier. He's from Marion, Indiana. His father and my father were close friends. They were in the same business, selling beer. But more importantly, what I'm holding up here is something that Peter was instrumental in creating. And I never dreamed when I was at Purdue University that one day I would be able to carry C-SPAN around in my pocket. And this is what it looks like. If you don't have the C-SPAN Now app, you ought to put it on your phone during this period. Peter, I know you're going to talk to everybody tomorrow, but why did you come here?
After graduating, I'd interned in Washington during college, and afterwards came to work there and was trying to do that great networking. And of course, I reached out to Mr. Lamb, Brian, because our fathers were friends, and I had met his parents many times as I was a kid. And he immediately offered a position at C-SPAN, saying, we're going to be growing, we're going to do this. And I eschewed that offer. I said, no, I came to work on the Hill. Within a few months, though, I had connected with Susan Swain and Brian and many others. And now, almost 8 years later, I'm still there doing it. There's a group of us that have been with Brian for that long and even longer. And we feel very proud and special about what we've done. And tomorrow we will talk about how we're taking the video library and using new technologies to give it more exposure, to hopefully increase its value. So we can get into that more tomorrow. But it's a fun discussion to have, and it's great that you all are participating with us.
I take responsibility for Peter's marriage to Susan, who was working here at the time. She wanted to go to Atlanta, and I said, no, you're not leaving us. And then they married, have 3 beautiful children. Diana Zuli, who's on your screen, taught what I call the Maymaster that we do every spring. I'd be interested, Diana, in what you learned about the students' relationship with the archive when you taught out here this last May.
Yeah, that's a great question. Can everyone hear me? I think, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I think what I learned about the students' relationship with the archive is how important it is for them to see that there is such a thing as media coverage that can be unfiltered and can be neutral, because I think they've grown up in such a partisan media environment that they think of the media as being a inherently polarized landscape. And I think them just having exposure to a different alternative, or to an alternative that allows them to think critically for themselves, has given them an optimism and a hope about how they can engage with mediated content and political content moving forward. And as an educator, that is really important for them to be able to see that possibility. And I think they see that through the archive and through the work you've done with C-SPAN.
It's fun to have you here with us for a couple of weeks. Bryce Dietrich, you are new to Purdue, but not new to the archive. What do you say from your perspective is the value of what Robert's put together?
So I would say that I learned a very long time ago that the C-SPAN Video Archive is perhaps the greatest collection of political speech ever compiled. Certainly, with respect to video, it is one of the greatest collections, if not the greatest collection. It's really hard to find a better resource when it comes to understanding political rhetoric and political communication in the United States. What has happened since my first catching wind of the C-SPAN archive is simply amazing. So my first collection of C-SPAN videos, I actually mined the C-SPAN website, and I was so scared that Robert was going to catch me and figure out what I had done to collect my dissertation work, that I really did keep it. I went to great lengths to keep it kind of under wraps, that there was a lot of C-SPAN video to be had for my study of US floor speeches. But then at my first CCSE conference, I met Robert and I kind of hinted at what I had done. And not only was he very impressed, but he was very supportive. And since then, the research infrastructure has expanded rapidly. And now you don't have to mine a website. You can actually work with many of the tools that Robert has created to make C-SPAN data more accessible. And myself and Jake, who's also on the call, are actively pursuing expanding the use of the archive and making it more available for the types of work that we're interested in doing. So it really is second to none.
I'll get back to some more of you in a moment. I'm going to spend just a little time giving you some background about how C-SPAN started and where it is today. But recently, I've had an experience, and I've been doing this for 45 years, actually longer than that. But I grew up in Lafayette, went to Jeff High School, graduated from Purdue in 1963. I'm the oldest person by far on the screen. And when I grew up in Lafayette, there was no cable television. We got it in 1965. And I look back on those days when what we had available to us in Lafayette was one television station, and I worked there for a while. But CBS didn't find us important enough to allow us to affiliate. So it was an independent station. And they were a disaster back in my time in Lafayette. Eventually, Channel 18 became CBS. The reason I mention this is because growing up with ABC, NBC, and CBS, and usually one independent, and it actually came out of Bloomington, Indiana. The signal wasn't that good. It was owned by Sarkis Tarzian, and he sold television sets back in those days. And in 1952, my family and I watched television for the first time on a 13-inch, about that big. And I think it was a Capehart. And Robert Browning may know who Capehart was. Do you, Robert?
Yes, he was a senator from Indiana.
He was an 18-year veteran. He started the Capehart television sets and radio and phonographs and all that stuff, but they bought him out and he didn't have much to do with it. But it is interesting. Capehart was, he was kind of the picture of one of those foghorn leghorn type senators from the old days. And but that's what it was like in Lafayette. And I'm going to jump to recently, because my first reason for wanting to get involved in all this from the very beginning was because I came to Washington in the Navy and I started seeing things. I would go down to the House of Representatives. I go to the Senate, sit in the gallery. Nobody else was there. And they didn't care. And it was at night because they had these night sessions. And I kept saying to myself, the public ought to be able to see this. It was that simple. Nothing, wasn't an intellectual experience. It was, wow, this is different. It's unusual. The public has no idea that this is going on, and wouldn't it be interesting? This was early, before there was any dream that something like that could go on cable. But just recently, I've had an experience that is very much related to today. And I've found, again, the enthusiasm, the spirit, the excitement for what I found in the early days. And that's, I started going to the U.S. District Court, which is only about 4 or 5 blocks from where I sit. And the trials of the January 6th Oath Keepers, the Proud Boys, and I would sit there day after day after day, because I'm not exactly a key employee of C-SPAN these days, even though I'm here every day. But I go there and I absolutely could not believe how interesting it was. I knew nothing about the courts, although when I first came to this town years and years ago, when I was in the Navy in '66, I started watching the Bobby Baker trial. And Bobby Baker ended up going to prison. He was a Secretary of the Senate. But anyway, it's just when I went to this court, and I'm still going to the court, I'm thinking the public ought to be able to see this. Come March 4th, when our former president has to sit in that court every day. It ought to be something that the public can see, and they're not going to see it. We've done everything we can, getting together with other television operations and journalism people in this town to get it to open. And they have not made a final decision, but they're signaling to us, which I fully expect. No way. The Chief Justice doesn't like the idea. He's the head of the Judicial Conference. Judicial Conference makes the initial decision. Then it's up to the local judge. I don't know whether Judge Chutkan would do it or not. She's very sharp. Interesting. It's so much fun to watch it because Judge Chutkan is the district court judge that's going to hear the Trump trial. And she is a mixture of Thai, Jamaican, African-American, 61-year-old woman, Yale graduate, incredibly good in court. Interesting, because I've seen a lot of these judges, and she's really good. She's got full command of her court. And I've sat through a bunch of her activities, but I want you to be able to see this. Now, get this, though. You take the time. You can fly out here, even though you'll have a hard time getting in that courtroom. Walk down the hallway from courtroom 9 to courtroom 19, and it's the overflow room. And guess what? It's on television. You can watch it on television in the court, but the public at large can't see this. So that's the enthusiasm I have today for wanting to do this is exactly the same way it started. And I realize we are not the Ed Sullivan Show. And I'll bet some of you on the screen right now have never heard of Ed Sullivan. But I have to just divert for a little bit, because when I was growing up, my mom and dad and brother had to sit, not at a choice, had to sit every Sunday night and watch the Ed Sullivan Show at 8 o'clock on CBS. And the reason I mention that is because what we have today is the complete opposite of those days. And you all can't feel it because you have so much available to you. But we had to watch Ed Sullivan, and he was one of the dullest human beings that ever lived. But when Elvis Presley appeared on his program in 1956, 82% of the people in this country that had television sets watched it. That's how powerful he was. And when the Beatles appeared on there in 1964, 70 million people in the United States watched the Beatles on Ed Sullivan's show. And he had one of those shows that you don't see anymore. He'd have Topo Gigio, the little Italian puppet. And the next minute, he'd have Sophie Tucker, who my father loved and I couldn't stand. She was a woman that sat at the piano and she had her handkerchief in her hand, and she blew out songs all the time. And I said, oh, God, I can't stand her. And then the next thing they'd have is somebody that juggles. And then they'd have comedians. And the interesting thing about it, the top person to ever appear on Ed Sullivan was a comedy team called Wayne and Schuster. I never remember. I have no memory of it. But anyway, we had no choice in those days. So we have all this choice today. And that's C-SPAN's in the middle of that. And by the way, we're not, as somebody once said, the most exciting turtle in the pet shop. We are a service. So to have Robert Browning figure out how to capture 200 and what is it, Robert, 80,000 hours of television, which, as Bryce just said, is the history of the last 40 years of politics in this country, is just a fantastic accomplishment. And that's why you're all here. And we're not a big deal. We got a little tiny company of 170 people. We used to be bigger because of what's going on, and people are cutting the cord on cable television. If it wasn't for things like what Peter's done with the C-SPAN now, we have to be there for the future. Our biggest problem is finding the money to support it. Everything about television is about money. Everything is about money. And we used to have 100 million paying customers. We now have about 52 million and going down. We get only 75 cents a year total per customer. ESPN gets somewhere on the order of $120 a year. And so it's a wild time and a wild situation. And we're just delighted that you all have any interest at all in researching politics using the archive. And I'd like to switch. And anytime anybody has a question, fire away. But in the meantime, before you ask a question, I see Christina Walker on my screen. Christina, tell us where you're from.
I'm originally from Michigan, but I'm a PhD student in the political science department here at Purdue.
What's your interest in political science?
So my dissertation focuses on disinformation and understanding why politicians share it.
Misinformation. There's no misinformation, is there, in our country right now? Give us an example of something that you've spent some time on.
So for this conference, I've been looking at the January 6th congressional hearings and the misinformation about the big lie and surrounding the election and election fraud following the 2020 election.
I want to mention that in sitting in the court one day, I watched a jury being chosen for the Oath Keepers trial. And as luck would have it for me, and I think for the audience that would be interested, a woman I worked with here at C-SPAN, and so did Peter, shows up and gets on the jury. And I'm sitting there going, I can't believe this. Because I have a weekly podcast that I do. And I thought, wow, wouldn't it be fun to talk to her after this trial's over? I won't bore you with the details, but she did it. And it's available for an hour and 45 minutes, talking about what it was like to be on that jury. And I'd have to say, it's a very confusing message. Ellen, and that's what I call her that's her name in the podcast, is a very bright woman. And her analysis of what goes on in the jury room is fascinating. And it has some relevance to whether Donald Trump sits there for 3 months and whether or not they can get a jury. And if they get a jury, whether or not he's convicted on the 4 charges that they've issued against him. Savannah, tell us about you.
Hi, I'm a first-year PhD in the Brian Lamb School of Communication, and I'm actually an organizational and risk communication scholar, so I've never actually done political communication research, but it might be something I'd consider in the future, and I've always really loved the C-SPAN archives. I did my master's at Purdue as well, and so I think it's something I might be able to use in the future.
Where are you from?
North Carolina.
What part?
Charlotte.
My wife was born there. That's why I asked that.
Oh, wonderful. It's a great place.
Jen Howie, you teach political science, communications, all this stuff. Tell us your perspective of students and learning through an archive.
I think the students here are really excited about learning about media and politics generally. I know Diana teaches PolCom and I teach the media and politics course, and our classes are always full. They're so interested and so engaged with it. And one of the things I do in my class is have them use the archive to try to find examples of some of the concepts we talk about in class. And they do such a good job. They find such interesting examples of the different theories that we're talking about in class and seeing it actually play out through the archive. And I think that's been a really good learning experience for them. And I think they enjoy doing it too.
Andrea Langrish, are you there?
Yes, I am, Mr. Brian Lamb.
You were hiding. You've been doing this for a couple of years, running this CCSE. What's your take on students and the archive, and how hard is it to get them interested in using it?
It's not hard to get them interested in the C-SPAN video library. Getting them to use it's another thing, because that means they're going through it. So that takes a little bit of training to do, but they are very interested in a non-political point of view and being able to hear directly from the horse's mouth, as you would put it. And as you know, we have the Lamblings, which is the CCSE student community, which was created by students for students specifically to facilitate nonpartisan conversations, and they use the C-SPAN video library all the time.
You're from where?
Illinois.
Matthew, give us your background and why you're interested in this at all.
Yeah, so I'm from Minneapolis, Minnesota. I am a second-year PhD student at Michigan State University. I apologize if you can hear a lawnmower in the background. I'm at an apartment building and they're doing
Can't
some
hear
yard
it.
work.
No
All right,
problem.
great. Yeah, but I studied the U.S. Supreme Court and specifically judicial behavior, and I saw this as a great opportunity to look at how the Supreme Court justices are communicating with the public off the bench, which is something that is being looked at more frequently in our field.
And where are you from originally?
Minneapolis, Minnesota.
Minneapolis. It's just picked as the happiest town in America. Did you see that?
Yes, exactly. It's a great place.
I thought that was Lafayette. Speaking of the Supreme Court, and we've had an interesting time with them over the years. We've tried to get them to go on television. There was a time where we thought that we had a possibility. This was 25 years ago. Chief Justice Rink was shut that down very quickly. We actually did a live call-in show from the court. And when he found out about it, he said, no more of that stuff. We don't want that here in this court. But I find it fascinating, and sitting in the DC court, the US District Court over here, that the marshals, and it's almost to the point of it's overwhelming. The marshals are obsessed with these things. They come in court every day and they basically say to you, if you take your phone out, we're going to shoot you. And it's funny, I have taken my phone out and I was pulled out of the court. And very nasty, they were very nasty to me. And I kind of chuckled. I said, this is incredible. What am I going to do? What's the difference if I do get this? You know, you're sitting in a courtroom where they're using a vast amount of the video that we're all talking about here, a lot of C-SPAN video on January the 6th. And if they didn't have the video, quite frankly, I'm not sure they'd have these convictions. That's what's really different about this process. By the way, if you haven't paid any attention, over 1,100 people have been indicted and 180 or so have gone to prison. So, I mean, this is the largest prosecution ever by the Justice Department. And they have gotten 1,100 and some that they've already charged, but their goal is 2,000. And they've got a whole list of people they're trying to find. But watching inside, and it's the same thing at the Supreme Court, they act like we're about to commit a crime if we ever do anything, take pictures or anything. Although you can stand outside of the court on a day they're not in session and click away. And we've done a documentary on the court. We've done a documentary on the White House and a documentary on the Capitol, which is all available online to you. But this town is so jumpy. And I keep asking myself, what's the problem? What are you worried about? But anyway, there's another Matthew on the screen. Matthew, where are you from?
Hi, Brian. I'm Matt Burkbauer from Indiana State University.
Terre Haute.
Yes, Terre Haute, Indiana. We are the home of Eugene Debs, and we have the Home and Museum on campus. And we use the Eugene Debs lesson as someone who can go to jail, a federal prison, for violating the Espionage Act and still run for president and still get votes.
And have a sentence commuted by a Republican president.
Yes, that's true as well, about 5 years later. So that's one good lesson. I've published with the Archive book series a couple times, and I serve as an editorial board member with Robert and a team of other individuals. And I look forward to all the papers. I was going to ask you about going back to the Court of Appeals. We know that C-SPAN has good access to audio recordings of the Supreme Court. So I wanted to know if you're going to pivot and try to do the audio with Trump's trial.
It's all in our request about audio, and actually it's funny. I thought sitting over there last week, I thought to myself, this would be perfect audio because we keep thinking television, but that's in the Supreme Court. That's the fascinating thing that's happened through the years. When we first started up as a network, the Supreme Court rules were you can get the audio of the oral arguments 6 months after the end of the term. And the next move was, and part of this happened because of COVID, that it jumped all the way to during the Gore, Bush v. Gore decision back in 2000, that we could get it. I don't remember, Peter, you might, it was either right after the official argument, or it was the next day. I can't remember what it was. We couldn't do it live. But now, because of COVID, we can get it live. And they only meet those 60 times a year. I mean, they used to meet much more than that, 150 times a year, but now they only meet about 60. And we can get it live, and we use it, and we put pictures in front of it. It's not very good television, but the substance is there. So this Chief Justice has kind of eked along and opened it up a bit, and but again, no television. Matthew, I'd be interested in what value you've found out of the archive. How have you used it?
Oh, I can tell you a few stories, but one in particular that I like to use in my classroom is this idea of when you find that perfect 3-minute, 4-minute, 5-minute clip, House floor speech, committee hearing speech, and it fits so nicely with your classroom lecture, and it just enriches it for 20 minutes, 30 minutes with the students, and you get the discussion going. And it just really elevates my in-classroom experience when I can find that clip. And one that I use quite a bit right now is a Sheldon Whitehouse subcommittee on the environment, and he uses the term corporate federalism. And I just love it. And he makes an argument about being a downwind state and getting everyone's pollution in Rhode Island. And it's just been a super valuable addition to my class lecture. And I have a dozen of those now that I use in the pipeline.
Robert, did you see Sheldon Whitehouse on the Senate floor last week?
I don't think I did. I don't think I did.
Reason I mean, he's very, very Democrat.
Yes.
That's fine. But the reason I bring him up is that he did a bit on the Senate floor last week. It's really, you ought to go to school on it. I mean, it would be a really good teaching tool. And he's been on this kick for a long time. The dark money is his
dark money, Supreme Court. Yeah.
Supreme Court, but he did a number on Leo Leonard last week. I watched the whole thing. He stood up on the Senate floor, and it's worth you looking at, because he takes you through the whole the machinations of Leo Leonard, who was responsible for finding the candidates for the Supreme Court, the latest ones, the 3 Republicans that send the Democrats up the wall. But it's fascinating to watch, and he's on it bad. But that's the way Sheldon
Brian
does. Yes.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I wanted to interrupt when you're finished.
I'm done. Go ahead.
I wanted to introduce you to someone that you haven't met yet, Jessica Collier. Jessica, I'm calling on you. You introduce yourself to Brian because she's a new faculty member in communication.
Hi, Jessica.
Hi, it's great to be here. Excuse me, I have my lunchbox out.
That's perfectly all right. Tell us about yourself.
Yeah, I'm from Shenandoah, Virginia, a very small town in rural Virginia. Just started at Purdue this semester, teaching political comm this fall, making great use of the C-SPAN archives for those lectures. My students are loving it, and excited to attend the CCSE conference for the first time. So to see the extent of research being done with those using the archive.
Where did you go to school?
I got my PhD at the University of Texas at Austin.
Nice place. Shenandoah is a nice place too. They have that little school out there, a music school, a lot of music out there at the Shenandoah University, or whatever they call it.
Yeah, very small college. I'm surprised you've heard of it.
Yeah, I've been out to see it. Yeah, I have to acknowledge Jessica, welcome, but I have to acknowledge one of my all-time favorite human beings, Ralph Webb. Ralph, are you going to come on the screen, or are you going to hide? Ralph has been at Purdue practically since I was there. Yeah, he said he probably, if he's like me, he can't even operate the video part of all this. But anyway, Ralph, it's good to have you with us. Andrea, tell us about yourself. Andrea Terry. Are you there, Andrea? Andrea's not there. How about Leah? Are you there, Leah? Pulling
yes,
this.
I'm here.
Go ahead. Tell us about yourself.
I'm here. Hi, I'm an associate professor of applied linguistics in the Department of English with faculty affiliate status in the political science department, and a couple of other places on campus. My research broadly looks at the computational linguistics aspects of political speech and world leaders. What I'm working on right now is an NSF-funded project on multimodal communication. And so this is the paper that my colleague is going to present at 1:30. Is looking at the White House Correspondents' Dinner speeches in humor. Am I frozen?
No, yeah,
No.
well, we just have your picture.
Oh, okay, good. Okay. So we're looking at multimodal communication through the theoretical perspective of embodied cognition from philosophy. So looking at how the person, the place, the space, the general climate, like the political polarization climate, influences how people talk about how funny they are and how well they're received. And so this is my first time working with C-SPAN data, and it has been a real delight to work on this project.
Are you aware of Donald Trump's appearance at the White House Correspondents' Dinner?
So the contrast that I'm doing is Michelle Wolf in 2018 with Al Franken in 1996, but he wasn't there at the 2018.
No, that's not why I brought it up. It's a myth, but it's a good myth. Robert, you know the story. Why don't you tell it?
No, go ahead.
Well, Donald, I think it was 2011. I'm not sure, but no. Yeah, it could have been 2011. He was in the audience. And Barack Obama was president, and he was giving a speech. Our cameras are the only cameras there usually. People take our feed. But that night, Barack Obama started making fun of Donald Trump. And the myth is that Trump made his decision that night to run for president because he was so angry about it. It's entirely possible. It's entirely not possible. But it's always been interesting, and we have the video, and it's worth looking up. Robert can find it for you if you want to see it. But he's sitting there, and he has, what would you call his face? Does not exactly, it's expressionless at the time. Yeah. So there are things that happen. There's another famous White House Correspondents' Dinner. Some of you may never even heard of this guy. He's no longer alive, but he was hugely popular 20 years ago. A guy named Don Imus, who had a radio show out of New York. And Don Imus gave a speech, and he promoted it, and it was very helpful to us. We don't care what he said, but he was calling it the speech from hell. And he went in there and ripped a lot of people, as he always did on his show, including, shouldn't even mention it, Peter Jennings, God rest his soul. And he said something to the effect, I think Peter Jennings is under the table out there with an intern. And but he also then said some rather strong things about Mrs. Clinton, who was sitting on the dais with him. So those events, I'm not sure how important they are. I'm not a big fan of them, but I think that things do happen there. We do have some long stories about it. Ralph Webb, thank you for going on camera. Very impressed. I'm impressed that you're even with us. I love it. Is Josh Boyd still on screen? I can't see him. No, I think he went away. You'll see him later in the event. But Josh spends a lot of time with the undergraduate students, and it's got a great view of undergraduate students. Jake, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Tell us about yourself.
Okay, my name is Jake Truscott. I'm a postdoctoral researcher with the Center for C-SPAN. My research primarily focuses on the intersection of judicial politics and computational methods. And it's funny, if you don't mind, just a quick side story. When you're talking about bringing phones into the Supreme Court, I interned at the court when I was an undergrad, and they made a point of letting us go to the arguments, just so we could have that kind of, environment, that kind of experience. And I remember distinctly one day I went to an argument for Samsung versus Apple, which the case itself wasn't entirely interesting, but I think just because of the names of the parties, it got a lot of public attention. There was lines around the block to get in. And by the time I got up there, they were just starting arguments, and they let us usually go in through the side entrance into the courtroom chamber where the advocates and everybody else come through. And if you get there early enough, they'll make you go through a scanner, make sure you don't have anything electronic on you, get your phones out. But by the time I'd gotten over there, security was gone. I just walked straight through the door, and I'm sitting there in the middle of Samsung versus Apple. And I remember just kind of adjusting my leg and feeling my phone in my pocket. And when I tell you I sprinted out of that courtroom, I don't think I stopped for a solid 150 yards, just because you're exactly right. It's the marshals. You never know who is who because they're all in suits. They're all kind of stationed over the place. You never know who is who. So yeah, I'm 100% with you on that one. It's a bit ridiculous, but yeah, it's terrifying.
Well, I may get arrested before it's over because I have violated the rules and I've taken some pictures. So, but I'm not doing anything with them. I just done it because I'm basically a rebel at heart and thought, well, see how long I can get away with it. It may not be long. If you see me in prison, you'll know why. Kimberly Porter, tell us about yourself and why you're involved in all this.
I'm a PhD student here at Purdue. I'm going to be graduating in May. I'm actually in the School of Nursing. And I actually am a clinical professor for nursing as well here at Purdue. And the reason I'm interested is because I talk about the political climate within mental health nursing, and how that applies to nurses, even just working in a hospital. So I saw the information about this conference and I thought, I'm going to jump on and see what this is about and if this is stuff that I could use.
What are you going to do after you get your PhD?
Believe it or not, I'm going to continue doing what I do. I practice a day, I teach, and I also do some research. So I'm doing all things I love.
Mary Fran, I don't know whether Kimberly has met Chris Morris, who would be an interesting opportunity because Chris worked in corporations and she worked for a pharma. She worked for Cleveland Hospital, and she's now getting her degree in nursing. And I don't think she'd mind if I told you she's close to 60. And it's just she got 6 kids, and she's a Purdue grad, and she's come and helped. She's been on Mary Fran's advisory committee, and you two would be a great thing to get you two together because it's fun. She's got a whole different perspective on it than we do, and she's really not a communications person as much as she is knowledgeable about companies and politics and how it all works. Kara Smith, you're hiding. I don't see your picture. Tell everybody about yourself if you're there. If you're not there, that's Andrea. Kara, tell us, there you are. Tell us what you're doing.
Hi, sorry. No, I'm working on stuff for the rest of the research conference that we have this week. So my name is Kara Smith. I'm a second-year master's student here in the Brian Lamb School of Communication, focusing on public relations and organizational communication. And my connection to the CCSE is I am the marketing graduate assistant this year. So that's been really fun working with Andrea and Medea, who I know is on screen. And I have a lot of my favorite professors on screen as well, and some friends as well. So
and where are you from?
I'm from San Antonio, Texas. Yeah, so lived there most of my life. I went to undergrad at a small Jesuit college called Canisius University in Buffalo, New York. So if anyone's familiar with Jesuit institutions, I studied communication and political science as well. So I was a double major in my undergrad.
Down there with the Riverwalk.
Yes, absolutely. I recommend everyone go. And I have Matt Stockler, if anyone knows Matt. I'm making him come on screen.
Congressman Stockler, he's back there. Yes. Hi, Matt. How you doing?
How are you?
Matt was out with us in the class, and Matt's been very active in politics. And one day we'll see his name somewhere with a big placard saying Stockler for whatever, maybe even president someday. We've missed so far Medea, who is the spark of our CCSE. Medea, who is a brand new grandmother. And if I ask her about her granddaughter, she'll wax eloquently for hours about that. But Medea, tell us how you fit into all this.
Hi, everyone. I'm Medea Bickett. I'm the program manager for the Center C-SPAN. I am kind of the duo with Andrea that helps to make all of our programs run. I've been hard at work in the background with this research program and super excited to see everybody. And I hope it's a successful conference.
Good to have you. She's a lot of fun to have around and a big helper when we're doing all this stuff. Do you have a question, Jessica? No, I guess it's I'm trying to figure out where, oh, there it is. For some reason or other, the hand was over your face. Dakota, the last one on the screen that we haven't heard from. Tell us about yourself. Hi.
Hi, I'm an assistant professor at the University of Denver, and I think I'm the first presenter of this whole shebang, which is like a lot of pressure.
You can handle it, I'm sure. Where are you from?
I grew up in Florida, in Central Florida, but I've lived in Alabama, Texas, Utah, and now Colorado.
Denver University has a huge connection to most of them are all deceased members of the cable television business. And the Daniels School of Business is named after Bill Daniels, who gave them a lot of money. And there's several other things. I think that the clock tower there is named after somebody. And by the way, the reason that my name is on the School of Communications has nothing to do with money for me. It was not my idea. And I'm not sure it was even a smart idea, but it's been fun being involved with everybody in the school. And it's, normally people get their names on things when they give money. For some reason or other, I didn't have to give any money. I don't have any money, except what I do have will go to the children I don't have and the grandchildren I don't have. So what can I say? I'm going to give up at this point and let you either ask questions, or if Andrea, you're ready to shut her down, that's fine too. This has been really fun to see everybody and get your background.
Well, we'll take 2 questions from the audience if anybody would like to be brave enough to ask the questioner himself some questions.
And if you're not,
I promise he doesn't bite. He has some great answers though.
I'll start with a quick question.
Yes, Matthew.
So in January of this year, during the Speaker McCarthy voting process and his bid for Speaker, I think C-SPAN talked about different cameras, more cameras in the House floor, and I wanted to know if that was ever going to be a possibility in the future to have those new camera angles, more camera access on the House floor, or do you think that caused probably a backlash and negative backlash and that won't happen again?
Matthew, all you have to do is look at what's going on right now. They will not let us cover the activity on the speaker selection on the floor of the House, and that's a complete backlash to last time around. And my prediction, and Peter may disagree with this when he talks with you, but my prediction is they will never let our cameras in there. I will just tell you one quick story. We've been proposing this idea for the last 40 years that we put our own cameras in there. Years ago, we made the proposal, and I can't even remember. It may have been Pelosi, first time around when she was speaker, said, oh, that's a good idea. We'll form a committee. And that's the death knell on anything. So they got a Republican, Peter Hoekstra, and a Democrat, help me, Peter, from Maryland. He was the majority leader.
Sarbanes?
No, and then the House. He's still there. Anyway, it does.
Raskin?
No, he was majority leader. That doesn't matter. I'll just tell you the story.
Steny Hoyer.
Steny Hoyer. Thank you. We're running out of time. But anyway, they said they had a dinner over here in a restaurant in this building and invited me to come and talk about this whole thing. And they had a proposal. This is how silly it is in this town. The proposal was that we put, there's an area at the back of the chamber and rope it off. And that we would promise never to show that what goes on in that little area over there where they could all go and negotiate their deals. And I looked at him and said, are you nuts? What do you think? I mean, how crazy would that be if we agreed to do that? And I knew this was never going to happen. It's not going to happen. They don't want, control is the word I would use. It describes this town. among politicians and among bureaucrats. And control is the biggest, most important thing they do, controlling their image. And they'll work overtime to control their image. And it probably will never change. It's a miracle that we even have the access that we have right now. And it's just a little tiny step of the way, all the way along. And eventually, maybe someday, this will truly be an open city. But my guess is that don't count on it. I will tell you this. Robert's not with us any longer, but if you get on the archive, and this is hard to believe because there's a list, I wrote them down, the list of the most viewed things on the archive over the years. The single most viewed person event on there, and this you'll chuckle at this, it won't surprise you, is a Richard Gage, who's the founder of the Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth. He had over 1 million viewers of his call-in show when he was on here. And of course, that was the whole theory that the government blew up Building 7 and all this kind of stuff. And that's the kind of thing that people just love to watch. Trump was 951,000 views on one of his speeches, and Pelosi was 931,000 on one of her appearances. But the one that I wanted to tell you about was in 2010. Believe it or not, 528,000 people on the archive looked at the 2010 budget markup. So there is a future for budget markups on C-SPAN. One more question or no more questions, and I'll leave you guys alone. Anybody else have a question? It's all yours, Andrea.
Okay, well, Brian, I thank you so much for being our special guest and for a great opening session. If everybody would like a little round of applause to Brian. All right.
Thank you all. Have a good session. It's nice to be with you.